Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ben's Friends Podcast. Today on the podcast, we have survivalman Larry Roberts. Larry was a contestant on the History Channel show Alone. He appeared in 2 separate seasons. We get a chance to sit down to talk to Larry about some information that the show doesn't tell you, some behind-the-scenes stuff. We also get a chance to hear about the mental and physical toll that somebody can experience from spending months at a time out in the wilderness completely alone. The show Alone is super interesting. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead, look it up. It's super cool. And I really hope you enjoy the content that you get to hear from Larry today. Check it out.
Show starting. The show's starting. Shh. Show's starting. Shut up. The show's starting. Shut up. It's Ben's Friends Podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Mr. Larry Roberts, I'm glad to have you on the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm super excited to have you on. First of all, you're a survivalist, survival man, whatever you want to call it. How did you get into that? How does that start for somebody?
For me, it was just kind of almost embedded in my DNA. It was something that, like when other kids told their parents they wanted to grow up to be a doctor, or lawyer, or cop, or whatever they wanted to be, I said I wanted to be a Native American. And they always kind of got a chuckle at that and everything. But it was always something that I just was always fascinated with the Native Americans and the way that they could live with the land and just their different philosophies with nature and how to interact with nature rather than conquering it, just more living with it. So that, and then also just their primitive skills always to me looked like art. Like when I look at a arrowhead, a
Right.
napped arrowhead, it's functional obviously, but to me it looks like art.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, I've just always been kind of interested in that. And then as I grew up, I didn't really know that there were other people out there that knew how to do this stuff or were interested in learning how to do this stuff. The only resources I had available to me were the old Army survival manual from I think it was written during Vietnam, like the 60s. And
Wow.
so I would take some of these skills out, wherever. I was mostly living in the cities when I was a kid, or in the city when I was a kid. And, but still usually I had backyards and stuff. I'd go out and practice some of this stuff and just being a kid, try and mess around. And then once I got older, I actually ran away from home with my wife when I was 17.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so we got married at 18, and then we started having kids. I've got 2 kids, and then just kind of put that stuff on the back burner. And then as I was looking at, I only had a high school diploma, so I needed to go to college or do something, community college. And some of the electives for the degree I was trying for at the time, I could take Native American Studies. So once again, that kind of just, helped me go back to the earlier things. And I just researched the living crap out of it.
Yeah.
And then all these survival shows started coming on TV, like Survivor, even though that's, people would argue that's not a survival show. It's still the first show that had people out in the woods trying to make it,
Right.
So
Right.
that one came out. And then Dual Survival. I don't know if you remember that one with Cody Lundin and Dave Canterbury.
I'm not sure
They
if
were partnered up.
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that one. I remember one was, I want to say Survivor Man or something. Was that what it was called? There was one
Yep,
guy.
that's Les Stroud.
Okay.
So he did that. And but Dual Survival was really the first show that kind of kicked it off for me. And obviously it's scripted and everything like that. But
Right.
we were sitting there watching it one night, and my son had just almost graduated high school, and my daughter was going to follow. My wife says, "Why don't you research these guys and contact them and see if you can learn some stuff?" And by then I had already been filming YouTube for myself. And then, I started a YouTube channel, but then also I was really a prolific YouTube watcher. And what I would do is I would watch somebody's video, or I would take a survival book, and I would take the skill out of the book, and I'd go in my backyard and I'd film it. And that would help me learn, and then help me learn what skills were relevant in my area. Because there's certain skills that are good for a lot of different areas, and then certain specialized skills. So anyway, I started doing all that, and I kind of all just started coming together. And then one of the classes that I took with a person from the first season. Josh Chavez. The
Oh
guy,
man,
he was unfortunately the first one to tap because of the bear.
Josh, the bear guy. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, we had been kind of talking, and I saw the show and stuff, and so then I just contacted the producers and said, "Hey, give me a shot."
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know what the show Alone is, I mean, you could probably describe it a lot better than I can, because surprisingly, for how good the show is, not as many people have seen it. Is a lot of people I talk to, and I just bring it up. Hey, you know that show Alone? A lot of people haven't seen it or aren't familiar with it. So if you don't mind breaking it down real quick to anyone listening, just a quick summary of what is Alone, what is the show?
Sure. Well, in my opinion, Alone is basically the most realistic survival show that they have made to date. And what they do is they take 10 people and they put you in a certain location. And they have had, I did my show I did on Vancouver Island. First and second season were filmed in Vancouver Island. Third season was filmed in Patagonia. Fourth season was teams and went back to Vancouver Island. Fifth season, which I was on, also was in Mongolia. And then sixth and seventh seasons are in like around Great Slave Lake, I guess, up in Canada. But anyway, what it is they take 10 people and they take you, you're allowed to bring 10 items. Plus they give you some stuff for, like some leeway, like your clothes don't count for your items. Your sleeping bag does, but your clothes don't count. And they are very, very strict with what clothes you're allowed to bring. They lay out kind of like what they would do in the military, where you have a loadout inspection or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They make sure you 2 pair of pants, 2 pair of underwear, whatever. Like, I mean, they get so strict that even the girls couldn't bring hair ties.
Oh,
I mean,
wow, really?
oh yeah, it's really, really strict. And if there's any type of necklace that you have on that could possibly be used for anything, they make you take that off. But you can take 10 items. And like I said, in addition to the gear that they supply, and then they also supplied an air horn, pepper spray, a couple of different, like a marine radio,
Mm-hmm.
and a big GPS yellow brick thing that you had to carry all the time.
Yeah.
So safety equipment.
Right.
As far as the 10 items I took, they were a little bit different on Vancouver Island as opposed to Mongolia. And they give you a list of what you're allowed to bring, not brand names, but like what you're allowed to bring.
Okay.
So Vancouver Island, I think I brought, you'd think I'd write this stuff down before I got it. I forget, but I brought a knife, axe, saw. I brought a metal cooking pot. I brought some paracord, which is a type of rope, cordage we call it.
Mm-hmm.
I brought a ferro rod, which is a fire starting device, and I brought a sleeping bag, and I brought a gill net, and then the show got it wrong, but I brought 2 emergency ration items. You're allowed a max of a certain weight of emergency rations, and those rations could be, in my case, they were beef jerky and freeze-dried beans.
Oh, yeah.
But you bring pemmican. Pemmican is a very common one for the folks to do. Pemmican is it's almost like a Native American trail mix type thing, but only not near as good.
Right.
It's pretty bland, and it's just got fat and blueberries or whatever you happen to put in it, meat of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, some sort of emergency rations, and it's not a lot, but it's maybe something to get you through a hump if you need to get through it.
So if you were out there and you haven't eaten in 2 days, which we'll get to that in itself is crazy, but let's say you get a headache or you get a crazy migraine or, like something like that, like, do they supply you in the safety kit, like any medicine of any sort? If you're out there for a few months, like you may get sick,
I didn't they did give us a first aid kit for sure. But it was mostly for like little boo-boos. It wasn't like,
Mm-hmm.
Well, they did give us a tourniquet. So they gave us a tourniquet for massive trauma.
Right.
And then most of it was just, run-of-the-mill type stuff. I can't remember. There might have been, they didn't give us a lot. Like it might have been like 2 anti-diarrheal pills. It wasn't like they were going to give you a bottle of it.
Right.
And can't remember if they gave us any painkillers at all. I didn't need to really get into the first aid kit. I mean, I looked at it, but then I put it away. I only got like minor little cuts, and most of the time I just used like moss or some sap, some balsam fir sap
Some
or something.
natural remedies for those things.
Right. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't, well, I take that back. I did have I remember having a quite an upset stomach in Vancouver Island. And there was only one in Vancouver Island. It's the Pacific Northwest, and there's not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
variety of plant life. You know, it's just, well, there is, but I mean, it's a lot different than what I'm used to. And it's mostly just like dense rainforest type thing. So, but anyway, out on this one particular rock that I had to totally climb up on top of, there were some yarrow plants growing. So I was able to make a tea out of yarrow, and that actually did help my stomach quite a bit.
Oh, wow. So when you're out there and you're going through it, how much of a difference, because it's a last man standing type of format, you know?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. The winner, so you get all these items, you
Right.
go out, you film everything yourself. They give you all the filming equipment. They do come out every couple of weeks or week or something, change out your batteries and your media card and stuff like that. But for the most part, they, you know, like the show says, they leave you alone. There's no cameraman, there's no nothing. We're out there, we film everything ourselves. And if you see us walking towards the camera, that means we went out and set the camera up, walked back, and then did the shot. And then basically, so you're supposed to film everything, and then whoever the last person standing gets $500,000.
Wow. So like, how much of that played a mental role where, I mean, if I said, Larry, you got to stay out there for 3 months, 90 days, and you win 500,000, do you think that would have been easier to know, okay, I got this many days left? Or, and you know what I mean? Like, how much of a mental toll did I have no idea how many people are left. I have no idea if I'm going to be out here for another year. You know, like, how much did that play a role?
Well, it really did play quite a big role, just because when you're out there, you've got nothing to well, you do have things to stimulate your brain, but nothing like what we're used to, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the modern day world. So you get bored. I got bored pretty quick. I mean, it was beautiful out there, but I mean, there's nothing to do, you
Yeah.
know. But so you're just kind of sitting there in your own head, and you're thinking, man, you know, sure, I ate a fish yesterday, but I didn't catch one today. I'm starving. This sucks. I can eat some seaweed that just about makes me puke all the time or whatever. And then you start thinking, I bet somebody harvested a bear. They probably are tanning the hide right now. They probably got a nice log cabin made, and they're lounging in front of the fire, and they got all this food everywhere.
Of course.
So, I mean, and I talked to some of the other folks too, and they kind of had the same thoughts. They're like, oh man, I bet these other people are just killing it.
Yeah.
So that does play a role. Whereas if it was only you against you, it'd be different. But it was not that we were really against them, but we were kind of against the other folks, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's got to be in the back of your mind. I mean, every single day you wake up and you got to be like, I hope so-and-so went home today. I hope there's 2 guys going home today. I mean, how much of that were you doing? How much were you like, man, as much as I like these people, they seem like nice people, I hope they can't find a fish today, man. Like, I'm trying to get out of here.
Well, as sad as it is, yeah, I did think that.
Of
And
course.
it's sad because, I mean, you can't find a better group of people. I mean, these people are so nice and so good. But it wasn't necessarily that I hoped bad on them. It was more I hoped good on me. And I did joke around on the show. You know, I kind of joked. I'm like, well, it sure would suck if somebody's shelter broke down, right, or fell right now
Yeah,
or collapsed or something. But I don't obviously did never wish anything like that on anybody. But
of
yeah,
course.
you're hoping towards the end. You're like, my God, will these people give up? Holy crap!
Yeah. And that's something I know, at least in my household, while we were watching the season, that made you kind of appealing to the crowd because you seemed like pretty relatable. Like, to be honest, at first, me and my mom were like, I don't know if this guy, because you got frustrated real quick in the beginning. I think it was your location that you were pissed off about. You're like, man, how am I supposed to live in this spot? And so me and my family were like, oh man, I don't know if Larry's got it. I don't know if Larry's going to hang in there long. And then, you flipped the switch and things started going right. And you obviously made it extremely far, but I think your relatability, was pretty intriguing, and it kind of made us root for you even more though, because we're like, oh man, he's like us, the things he says and his honesty, and he's not like, oh, it's, such a beautiful day. And I'm just you were like, man, like I want to go home. I want to eat. This is pissing me off, but I'm not going to give up. And from a viewer standpoint, I thought that was pretty interesting. I think you were the first one to really catch our eye like that and be like, oh, this guy's cool. He's chill. He's like us. So,
Appreciate that.
oh yeah, no. But that was your character, so that it was really interesting to see how you progressed throughout, and kind of the ups and downs were just crazy. And I can't imagine being in your shoes. I wouldn't have made it a week. But so how much, you mentioned you got to film yourself, and a lot of people, when I talk to them about the show, a lot of people will say, oh, well, they're probably not really filming themselves. There's probably a crew. And I'm like, no. Listen, if you watch this, they're really filming themselves. So how does that work? Like, how many hours a day do you have to sit there and film yourself, or are there rules? How does that work out?
Yeah, we have a huge contract that we have to sign. And basically the gist of it is film as much as you possibly can. And I think they had it in there that we were supposed to film 46 hours a week, but I know I filmed way more than that, because every waking minute, and sometimes even when I woke up at night, obviously I turned on the camera. But yeah, they said you need to treat this like a full-time job. And they made it pretty clear to us that if we don't film, then they don't have a show. And actually you can be disqualified if you don't film enough. Wow. And I know some folks were talked to and told to step up their game and keep filming it, because these skills are hard enough as it is. Okay. These skills are hard. Just making rope out of tree bark it's not really a hard skill. It's just very time consuming. Mm-hmm. Everything in the woods is very, very time. And so it's not fair for us, those of us who were filming, and they said, try to use as many cameras as you can. They gave us a GoPro, and they gave us a little JVC, kind of like a handheld, like little home video recorder. And then they gave us a big camera with a, decent sized tripod. And so you would set up, and then of course we had mics. We had to, fish this mic cord up and try to make sure that it doesn't get seen, and put it here. We had to check the batteries every night, before you went to bed or morning, whatever you wanted to do, and check all the media cards. But yeah, it's a pain in the butt trying to do survival skills and setting up the camera and making sure you have a good shot, because you can, and then also in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm filming and I'm putting all this energy in here, and they may never even use the damn thing.
Yeah.
Because they can only a sliver of what you film. Because if you figure, I bet you on average, I filmed probably close to 80 hours a week. So if you figure that's just from me,
right?
And the other guys are filming that too. I heard when we got done in Vancouver Island, in New York City, they had every intern that they could find reviewing footage. And, like documenting stuff and say, hey, producers, just so that the main guys could look at maybe better content instead of me just whittling or something, whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have run across a couple people that say, oh, how did that shot happen? Or how did that shot happen? And, we don't have any control over the editing, but we filmed everything. I'll give you an example. In Mongolia, I threw my back out. I'm a little older, and I just have a little bit of a bad back, and I was trying to set up a Paiute deadfall. And so I was really kneeling down and really getting into it. Well, my back started just messing up. So next to my shelter, or next to where there was a tree lying down that was a birch tree, so I could lie down on the ground and use that birch tree to stretch my back out. Well, in Mongolia, I had terrible head rushes. I wasn't hydrating enough. The dandelions were screwing me up. But anyway, and it was super hot. So I had a head rush really bad. And I didn't really pass out, but I fainted kind of. Mm-hmm. And so you can see it in the show where I fainted, and I actually kind of grabbed the big camera because I thought I could hold myself up. And the big camera fell, and I'm lying on the ground, and you can hear me moaning or doing something. And the next shot shows me stretching over the tree. And I'm like, that's a total different area. That's a total different time, whatever. But they had to, in their defense, they kind of had to, there was nobody else filming it. I had no other camera set up, so nobody could see me laying there rolling around on the ground. And so they needed to kind of fill that.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I mean, I filmed me stretching my back out. You know, they played, as the seasons have progressed, they have played a little bit with the timeline, but
Okay.
everything we film is legit.
So I would imagine that as a survivalist and being someone who's you're clearly very comfortable with nature, and I don't know how comfortable you are with technology, but being out there in the most natural place in the world, you know, and then you have all this electronic equipment that you have to deal with, like, did it drive you nuts? I mean, on top of all the other stresses that are out there, where you like, God dang it, man, like I don't want to film anymore. Like I don't want to carry this camera all the way over there just to set it up while I fish. Or did it give you like the other side of it, where I would think is, I think I would actually enjoy the camera because it feels like someone's there, almost like you're talking to somebody, and it gives you a sense of like, you're not quite so alone. I mean, where did you fall on that?
Well, there's both aspects to that. When I was sitting around the fire, and if I was, you know, they just want you to roll the camera all the time, your thoughts, everything. So if I was just blabbing into the camera, oh yeah, man, that helped pass the time. It was around that, like my Wilson from, you know,
Yeah.
whatever it was or whatever. But yeah, I could totally just sit and talk and talk and talk to the camera. But when you have to pack it up and walk, like in Mongolia, you know, 100 yards to your fishing spot, and then, you know, for me, I'm pretty active fisherman, so I like to try and walk up and down the bank. Well, you can't really do that because the stupid camera's not
Mm-hmm.
seeing you. So you know, I'm almost gonna keep going, and then I turn around and look, and I'm like, that damn camera's clear back there. And I
Yeah.
think, well, I could just leave it there and, you know, whatever, just go walk. But if I catch a big fish, or if a bear comes out, or if something crazy happens, I won't have it on camera. I mean, you're supposed to, I mean, that's your job. That's your number
Yeah.
one job, is to haul that camera around film.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely gave me a purpose, but there was definitely times where, you know, I had my fishing pole in one hand and maybe my net in the other and the stupid camera in the other, and I'm fighting through brush, and I just thought, geez, I'd just like to just dump this camera right in the water.
Yeah, I would imagine. I feel like that would drive me crazy when you have all the other stresses going on. What about, so they drop you off at your location. Did they talk to you before, you know, they drop you off, and are they like, all right, Larry, here you go. You know, you're alone. See you later. Or do they give you any sort of prep talks before they ride out on the boat or leave on the helicopter or whatever? Or is it just like, all right, here you are. See you later?
Well, when you get selected, basically what happens is you apply, and then they select around 20 people. And those 20 people go to New York and go to I don't know, some sort of park outside of New York City. And then they have some, what they call their survival experts, that watch you. And so basically you're in tryouts. So they're giving everybody camera work, and they're looking at your footage, plus they're checking out your skills. And then once you're selected, when you go on location, whether that be Vancouver Island or Mongolia, they give you like a little bit of a nature walk. In Vancouver Island, we had maybe a 4-hour nature walk where this lady took us through the woods, and she said, you know, this is edible, that's not edible, this is edible, you know,
Mhm.
whatever. And most of the folks knew almost, you know, everything. That
Yeah.
a lot of the folks are really knowledgeable. I definitely learned a lot of things. And then in Mongolia, they took us through a similar thing, you know, and then they tell you about the dangers of the area. Like in Mongolia, it was a unique year where they had a lot of forest fires in Siberia. So there was this Eurasian black bear that was getting pushed out of Siberia into
Mm.
Mongolia. And it's a very, very aggressive bear, uh, smaller than our black bear, but more aggressive than our grizzly.
Okay.
And so that was a concern that they had never told it, you know, that we didn't know about until we got on site. And then when we were there too, they also told us about the pit vipers and things like that. Whereas in Vancouver Island, they told us about the bears, and, you know, I mean, they just told us, so
Hmm.
they give you a little bit. It's not a
Okay.
ton, but a little bit. And then also, you know, you're there for about a week before you launch, depending on
Right.
the season. And they also really give you a lot of camera training too. I was very lucky. Like I said, I just have a little tiny YouTube channel, and I did it mostly just for my own entertainment type thing. But it really helped me become more confident in front of the camera. Because I could watch my earlier videos that I've of course since deleted and stuff, and I'm not very comfortable in front of the camera. Where later on it's just like I'm doing the best I can, and if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, you don't. It was
Right.
a lot more comfortable. So a
Okay.
lot of the people had to kind of get comfortable, but then also figure out just a little tricks and stuff where I always like to flip the viewfinder this way, or I like to a lot of people just think you can just set the camera up and boom, you're done. No, you got to set the camera up and you got to look at yourself and see if you're in the frame, and and then if you walk over here, did you suddenly go out of the frame or whatever. There's a lot of nuances to the filming. So not to say that I was any expert by any stretch, but at least I had a little tiny bit of experience before we went into it.
Right.
Yeah, but basically after that week or whatever it is, launch day shows up and they're like, okay, you guys are ready to launch. We're like, yep. And they launch you and they say, okay, see you later. Here's your Pelican case full of camera gear, and somewhere out there you should camp, and there you go. See you later.
Oh man. So when that happens, you probably look around and you're like, oh man, this place is beautiful. This is going to be an experience. And then how much time until you're like, holy crap, like I'm really alone now. Like they're gone. This is my stuff. And now it's real, it's real life now. How long until that reality sets in?
In Vancouver Island, it took me a little bit, just because it was such an adrenaline rush and such a shock, kind of, because I haven't had too many helicopter rides in my life. I think that was probably the third helicopter ride, and the pilot was, he was good. He landed me on this postage stamp size beach. It was insane. But so I got out, and the survival guy's like, okay, mate, here you go. Here's your backpack, because they get it out. It's dangerous getting out of the helicopter. Here's your backpack. Your Pelican case is right over there. Survive the night, mate. Survive the night. Good day. And then they take off, and I've got my camera and I'm filming the helicopter take off, and then I'm just super pumped. And then I kind of look around, the helicopter noise dies down. It's probably a good 10 minutes before you just stuff starts coming back to normal, and you're like, okay, now what are my priorities right now? I've got this and this, but I don't have that, so let's get that. And I just started exploring my area, especially in Vancouver Island, because it was just, it was like a canyon kind of what they launched me in. And I had a really good camping spot at first, but it was right next to a creek. And in Vancouver Island, they measure the rainfall in feet, not inches. So I knew that if I camped next to that creek and it started raining, I'd get flooded.
Yeah.
So luckily we had a couple of dry days and I was able to camp there, but I was really sweating it. But yeah, the whole time, and it's really thick and really rugged terrain. So I just basically, the first 2 or 3 days, I didn't even worry about food. I knew where my water was. It was right there. All I did is just try to find a shelter location. I finally found one, but it was, and I had seen it, but it was like the worst, the last resort, and I just couldn't find anything better. So I camped up underneath a cedar tree. But yeah, about 10 minutes, let everything calm down, and then you got to explore your area, because you have no idea what type of resources you have there, because you've never set foot there. You've
Right.
seen other base camp and stuff, and what I've lived in the Pacific Northwest. I know approximately what it looks like, but every location is different.
Yeah.
So you just got to go look and see what your resources are. When you first look, and after you launch, it's like looking in the aisles of Walmart, and you're like, okay, that's a pine tree. I can use that for fire, and I can use that for first aid, and I can use that for shelter. There's a birch tree. I can use that for fire. I can use, boil the bark down for an oil. I can, it's great fire. You just start looking at everything. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a plan, whatever. You're just taking stock of your environment.
Yeah. For you, that's probably a lot more natural, than the average human who would be dropped off there. And because I think if I looked around, I wouldn't be thinking this is like a Walmart. I'd probably be thinking, holy crap, like I'd probably be so overwhelmed, that I wouldn't know where to start. So, you talked about, you knew where your water source was. Obviously, if you've watched the show, or if you're a survivalist, you know that finding a sustainable food source is so crucial. So you and a lot of the other contestants obviously experienced like hunger, like actual hunger, like you haven't eaten in days and you're using calories and you need food in your body or else you could be in trouble. Like, what is that? What is that like? I've been hungry and I've gotten a headache because I'm so hungry, and I've gone, maybe I had one meal that day, but to experience like true hunger, I feel like I would just lose my mind. But what do what is that? What is that like to be truly starving?
I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I'll tell you that. It makes you very emphatic, or not. It makes you very empathetic. I can't even say the word. It makes you very understanding of the folks in situations where they don't have enough to eat. Because at first, um, so I can go about 2 or 3 days without any problems, without any food at all. I've done it. Well, I did it on alone, and I've done it in survival classes. It's not, but after that third day or so, you have already you've put yourself kind of in a hole that you can't really dig yourself out of unless you get a big game animal or something. The thing is that it's so hard to find fat in the woods. But anyway, yeah, when you start, after about the third day, well, even before the third day, you start getting legit hunger pains to where your gut just hurts and hurts and hurts. And I tried to drink water to try to fill my stomach up so I would so those cramps would pass or whatever.
Mhm.
And they do eventually pass. But within about the first 2 weeks, I was already making new notches in my belt, maybe the first week. And it's something that towards the end, like how you said you would lose your mind, I kind of started to lose my mind.
Right.
And that's why I eventually so I was dreaming about food. I would just look out even during the day, and I'd start daydreaming, and I'd think, when I get back home, I'm gonna, hang out, I'm gonna see my family, and I'm gonna hang out with my buddy, and then we're gonna go to lunch, and then we're gonna eat this. And I just always went back to food. I'm gonna have a bacon cheeseburger with French fries, and you start salivating thinking about it. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I had a sweater type thing I was using for a pillow, and it would be wet from the drool. Just that I mean, that's just all I thought about. And on day 55, I had a really, really bad night in my shelter to where I had nightmare after nightmare after nightmare about food. And I just kind of woke up and I was like, well, I'm going insane. This sucks. I think I'm losing my mind. And kind of like in the movies, I almost had to slap myself and bring myself back and say, okay, man, relax, just get through the night and you'll be okay. And I was able to get through the night, and I wasn't eating really any of my emergency rations.
Mhm.
And after that, I started eating my emergency rations. And so what I would do is towards the end, when the fish were drying up,
Yeah.
the mushrooms were gone, everything, I would make it a point to only eat my emergency rations once every third day. So I would forage for 2 days, and whether I ate or not, then I would eat my emergency rations on the third day. And what I would do is I would take a handful of jerky. It would fit in one hand, and I'd put it into a 2-quart pot, and I'd fill it full of water, and I'd boil it for quite a while. And then I would drink about a half of the juice,
Uh-huh.
the broth, and that would be my meal. Just jerky broth. That was my meal.
Oh
And
man.
the next day I would fill that back up with water, and I'd boil it down again, and I'd drink that watered down broth, and then I'd had a little bit of meat to eat. And then, if I could ever add any shellfish or anything like that. I had a horseshoe shaped cove when I finally moved or whatever, and
Yeah.
I ate every single shellfish that I could find on that cove.
Yeah.
When I was done, there wasn't a shellfish left that I remember.
Yeah, I would imagine. So, what is a nightmare about food? You mentioned you had nightmares about food, then you were losing your mind. Like what do you mean by that? Like you're just like, I,
Constantly going. It's just a cycle. It's like a movie where it's just different frame
okay,
after different frame where you're eating candy. You're going into a grocery store, and you're just like a cartoon where you just reach out both arms and just whatever happens fall into your cart, man, falls into your cart. Or, hanging out with my buddy, and it starts to be a good dream, and I'm telling him about the experience, and all of a sudden it comes time to order, and it's just nothing about just food. Just that's all I can think about. And, you
wow,
have to wake yourself up. Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess it wasn't like a cheeseburger was trying to attack me. It was more that just so hungry, and I was just dreaming constantly about food. And then you'd wake up and be like, son of a gun, really wish I had something to eat right now, you know?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, so I'm living in Spain, and this is my second year in Europe playing basketball, and I love American food, or American fast food, Chipotle, Moe's, whatever, all that stuff. So when I'm out here, I crave like a Five Guys cheeseburger or a Chipotle burrito. So I feel like I kind of get like a sliver of what you're saying, but it's probably on a microscope scale, compared to what you went through. But so what was when you were out there? Because at some point you had to be like, this food, this is what I want right now. What was the most constant? Like you craved this more than anything else when you were out there?
Any type of cheeseburger, but mostly a bacon cheeseburger. Bacon
Okay.
cheeseburger. Right after I got out, after I tapped, that was one of the first things I ate. I mean, they give you some food to try to bring you back from. There's actually this thing. It's called refeeding syndrome, and I was never near this bad. But when the Americans or whoever liberated the concentration camps, sometimes the Americans felt really bad for these folks, so they would like throw out chocolate bars and throw out stuff to them. Well, they'd just chow it, and it would end up killing them because it was
Ooh.
really bad for get that stuff. So they took me to a doctor, and told me about this and everything. And but so they gave me some broth and stuff like that. But basically later that night, I was like, I don't care what the doctor said, get me a frickin' bacon cheeseburger with a root beer float or a milkshake or something now.
Yeah.
And then when I came home, I took a week off of work. But then when I went back to work, I couldn't, well, anywhere. Even when I came back, I couldn't leave the house without food on me. I always brought
Really?
yeah. I usually brought at least 3 or 4 granola bars, couple bananas, whatever. And then, like, I'm an electrician, so when we work, sometimes we have these little parts carts that we push
Mhm.
around. There was always food on my parts cart. It probably took me 6 months before I could leave the house without having food literally on me.
So was that a mental thing where you're like, I don't want to live 5 seconds with that feeling of hunger again? Or was it like a physical thing? Like I
Yep.
need to have, okay. So you just didn't want to go through.
No, there were times I didn't even eat it. I mean, believe me, I was chowing. I mean, every opportunity I had, I was chowing. But no, I mean, when I got back home, it would be like we could be going out to dinner, and I would have to pack granola bars. It was pretty intense. And then when I did it again in Mongolia, I thought maybe I was the only one, but it turns out multiple people who had stayed a long time in their respective seasons had like a PTSD, and we were really freaked out when we launched. I know that. I mean, I was gung ho as a son of a gun to launch for Mongolia. I was so excited, and I got on that helicopter, and it lifted off, and I looked at the producer, and I just started bawling. I said, "Shit, I'm gonna do it again.
Really?
Damn, this is
Really?
gonna." Yeah,
Was that a hunger thing, or was it like just the whole mental game of being out there? Was it like, I don't want to go without food, or was it just, man, I got to go through this struggle?
for me, it was just hunger. I know a lot of the guys. I mean, obviously, I missed my family. I mean, I've got great kids. I love my family, and but I knew they'd be there, and I knew they'd. I've spent time apart from my family before. My wife was in the Navy for years, and I'm an only child, so I've been alone a lot. The alone part, it sucks sometimes, and you kind of get in your head a little bit, but that wasn't as bad as no food. No food to me was, and when I say no food, it means, eating a couple of quarter size, pieces of shellfish, or eating, 5 or 6 dandelions for the day, or whatever you're eating. It's
Yeah.
not a lot. Or even
Yeah.
a solid fish. Even a
Right.
full fish, man, don't last all day. You can have
Yeah.
a 12-inch fish or whatever, and I would make that last 2 days. I would fillet it, and I'd eat 2 meals out of one fish.
Man. Were you getting sick of the same food just over and over, or were you just like, I got to stick it out? I got to eat. I need something.
Vancouver Island, I got extremely sick of the seaweed. The seaweed was horrible. I could not really stomach that. And then the chanterelle mushrooms, I do like chanterelle mushrooms. They're good, but after you've eaten them for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks straight, they get pretty old. But in Mongolia, well, either place, anytime I caught a fish, it was like the best thing in the world, man. It was so good. You're just sitting there, just eating little tiny morsels of it and just savoring every last little bit of it.
Are you are you a fish guy? Like, do you eat fish when you're home and in the States in your house, or was it just like that was the only thing you had, so you just went crazy?
I'm a pretty avid fisherman. I don't eat
Okay.
a ton of fish, but I mean, I'm very avid. And if it's, if I catch one and if it's keepable and if it's edible, I always bring it home. My wife loves fish. So yeah, we eat fish. I've fished my whole life, just about.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm watching the show and fish is like one of the only things I'm not crazy about. I eat almost everything. So I'm like, man, I guess I'd have to eat fish unless I'm going to catch, like you said, big game or something, but I mean, it's kind of silly, but that's kind of what I do the whole time. I think about what I would do in your shoes, and which is really stupid because I mean, I couldn't make it out there for more than 6 hours, but I just, I'm like, man, I would struggle with the fish, but I guess you got to eat what you have. Um, so I I watched season two, and obviously you did really well in season two. I didn't even know that you were in season five until I clicked on your bio and on your Instagram, and it said you were in both seasons. So I went ahead and watched that one, and it looked like it was almost like two different Larrys. Because I watched them pretty quickly, one after the other. So to see difference in your I wouldn't say your attitude, but maybe your mindset going in, and like seemed like you had this experience, which you did, and it almost seemed like you were this like calmer, like this Zen Larry. Did you feel like you were way more prepared mentally? I mean, I know you said you once it hit you in the helicopter, but once you got settled in and you were in Mongolia, did you feel a whole sense of like, okay, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, to some extent, for sure, I did. And then also, like I was saying, after that helicopter ride, it was about, so the producers do come out and see you after you first launch, or at least somebody comes out within the first day or two, just to make sure you're alive and survive the night and
Yeah.
stuff. And so they came out and they're asking me stuff, and I I did not like it when the cameraman or whatever showed up to change the batteries. I just kind of wanted to be by myself. It was very emotional for me, and then when they left, it was fine. But they showed up, and I started bawling, and I'm like, I can't do I can't push myself as hard as I did the first time, because I thought I could. I thought I could push myself past that point, but only being there like a night or 2 days, I knew immediately. I was like, oh, I'm screwed. I can't. I'm not going to be able to push myself as far as I did last time. So I made it a personal thing for myself to enjoy it more and don't put so much pressure on myself, and just to enjoy the experience for what it was. Vancouver Island, I definitely enjoyed. Some of it was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, but I definitely enjoyed it. But made a very, very conscious decision to push myself very hard. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. Mongolia, I did put a lot of pressure on myself before I launched. But after I launched, I'm like, well, screw it. I'm just going to do that the best I can, but still enjoy it and push myself and remember this experience and imprint it on my mind, but also don't push myself so hard. So, yeah. So, I mean, right away, it was like, I'm I'm not going to push myself to the brink like I did on
Right.
Vancouver Island.
Right. And I think you mentioned that actually if you watch the show, you mentioned that on your way out, you said, I have no reason to push myself and put myself through that again. But it's interesting because it's easier said than done a lot of times to not put that pressure on yourself, and to really sit back and take a deep breath and enjoy the experience when you're going through it, even if it's difficult to look at the positives in it. And but I think from a viewing standpoint, it seemed like you really did it. It seemed like you really um, followed through with it, and had a different mindset. And so do you think that helped you out going through it and thinking more positively and trying to just enjoy it? Did it naturally make it easier on you?
I think so. And I think it was it was the second time around was very therapeutic for me, because I was really, really hard on myself for coming in second in Vancouver Island. I was very, very disappointed in myself that, that I didn't win. And it took me a while to come to the realization that I did pretty good, that I did okay, and Vancouver or Mongolia, I had all these preconceived notions before I launched, and I'm like, man, I'm really going to push myself, suck it up, buttercup, you need to do better. And then I got out there and I was like, man, what more do you need to prove to yourself or anybody else?
Yeah.
You're surviving out here with nothing,
Yeah.
and I mean, so I kind of just, maybe that's just an excuse, me making excuses for myself or whatever. But when I got done, I was happy with what I did. I was happy with the way that I was able to survive in Mongolia and Vancouver Island. And it was just kind of, Mongolia just kind of put it in perspective. It was just like, you're close to 50, man. You don't need to push yourself like this. What are you trying to prove?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it would great to win, but I mean, once you're not going to win, it's like, hey man, just enjoy the experience, push yourself kind of hard, but still just enjoy the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you for coming to the realization and actually following through with it. I mean, it was very clear to watch that you seemed more comfortable mentally and seemed to actually be enjoying it. And, which was cool to watch from the viewer standpoint. Who on the show from season 2 or season 5 did you feel from the training and everything you did? Because you guys met, beforehand, you said they're good people and all that. Who did you think was your biggest threat? Who was like, that guy might last a while?
Vancouver Island, it was Jose.
Okay.
Jose is basically a native, and he's a Spaniard.
Mm-hmm.
Dang Spaniards. Super awesome guy. And but he is very learned in the Native American lifestyle and techniques and things. And when I met Jose after getting to talking to him and stuff, it was just basically like they just plucked this Native American out of like the 1800s or 1700s and put him on the show. So I would say Jose for on season 2, and then on season 5, I would have to say it was Dave Nessia. Dave Nessia, I don't know if you remember, but he was on the Patagonia season, which I believe that was season 3. And if you've seen pictures, I think the show is starting to learn as these seasons progress. So they don't realize how much we can push ourselves and how thin we can get.
Right.
Dave Nessia looked like a concentration victim.
Okay.
I mean, he had the classic starvation. He had all that fish stored, right, all dried and everything, but he didn't want to use his resources because he wanted to stay longer. So he kept starving himself. And I mean, he was thin.
Okay.
And I thought, somebody that can push themselves past what I thought was pretty thin.
Right.
I'm like, that dude's got some mental fortitude that's going to be tough and plus very, very, very skilled,
right.
Obviously.
Yeah, I'm actually watching season 3 right now. So I'm like on episode 6, I think. But
wait till you see
because he's already like you said, he's already thin. So I think they give you like a little preview of each episode, or one of those previously on Alone or whatever, and one of them it's someone who looks extremely skinny. So I'm assuming that's him. So that's interesting to go into it and think these are the 2 guys I got to beat out for that $500,000.
Well, and I mean, you asked who was the top one. I didn't say I was like right underneath them. There's a bunch of other dudes in front of me too, you know what I mean? But I mean, as far as top guys, those were the 2.
Yeah.
And then of course, you haven't seen the Patagonia one yet. Oh no, that's the one you're watching.
So I'm on that right now.
Carly is the one who, well, she's not the one who made the chair or who got spider bit and showed her behind or whatever. It's the other gal.
Okay.
And she's a basket probably. But anyway, she has just got some crazy mental fortitude and physical fortitude and stuff. And so she was way up on my list in Mongolia too.
Really?
You'll see. I don't want to give you any spoiler alerts, but you'll
Yeah,
see
yeah.
with her. Yeah,
Don't ruin
she
it for me. I'm only I think I'm on episode
right.
6, so I got a ways to go. So what was it I mean, a lot of people have such different reactions to the predators around you. I mean, you mentioned the bears and all that stuff, and I know there's pumas in certain locations. I mean, like for a normal human being, I mean, that's pretty alarming. And to be outside with nothing but a couple of pieces of bark between you and them, or whatever your shelter's made of, how do you go to bed at night? And trust, okay, nothing's coming. How does that work?
Well, for me, it's kind of like you just got to like, hey man, whatever happens, happens. I mean, you can't be scared to go and, I mean, I guess you can be, but I mean, I was cautious, and especially like you said, the pumas and Vancouver Island. That's basically one of the only, besides grizzly bears and stuff like that. But pumas or mountain lions in the States are freaking scary, scary individuals. And so I was always very cautious of them. And of course, you don't want to surprise a bear or anything like that. But I don't know. I just never really got worried about things. I just figured, what the hell, if they come in and they want to rumble, then let's go. I'll probably die, but it'll make good TV. I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I, in Mongolia, the wolves were outside my shelter and stuff, and it was just such a beautiful sound in the middle of the night. And this is how hungry I got. I just thought, I wonder what they killed, and I wonder if I can go from them.
Oh my
And then you
gosh.
get out there, it's dark, and they're a ways, they're maybe 100 yards or 200 yards out in the woods, and you're like, well, it's probably not the smartest idea to go try to take their kill. It sounded
Right.
like there was maybe 8 of them or something, but I don't know. I guess I just never really got that worried about it. I just figured, I was pretty passionate about the show. I was really passionate about it, and I was really passionate about testing myself and everything. And the predators were the least of my concerns.
Really. So, oh man. So you're out there, and have you ever seen Grizzly Man, the documentary?
Is that with the guy with the grizzly bear where he finally got eaten at the end with him and his girlfriend?
Yep, Timothy Treadwell. You ever seen that?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, crazy documentary. I mean, talking about a guy who's not afraid of the predators out there. I mean, but those were out there. Those type of bears were out there, were they not, in Vancouver Island?
Not in Vancouver Island, but in Mongolia, we did have a grizzly in
Oof.
our area. We had a park. We were in a park area, like a very restricted area where you have to have a permit to go into. And so we had a park ranger that would come in, and he gave us a couple of lectures through a translator. And he did tell us there was a grizzly in the area, but he said, don't worry about the grizzly. Those Eurasian black bears are really bad. He said, so they have yurts in Mongolia. They call them ger. It's a ger. And they will bust down the door to get into the ger to try to get food. And also, the park ranger told us about a couple that was in a car, and they must have had food, obviously, in the car. And the black bear attacked the car and tried to get in the car while they were in there.
Oh yeah.
So
No.
those were extremely, extremely aggressive bears. And the difference between, and no, I don't want to say any disrespect against the documentary or whatever, if this is the same one that I'm thinking of, the gentleman made some really bad mistakes. He thought that the bears were his friends, and they're
Yeah.
not your friends.
Right.
They're a beautiful, wonderful creation, but
Right.
you can't treat him like a little puppy dog. And if he's going to camp in certain areas that are absolutely known for bears, or if
Right.
he's going to go up and try to film himself with stuff, I mean, if there was a bear walking down my area, I wasn't going to, race out to it or, do something, try to take a picture with it or anything
Yeah.
like that. You keep a respectful, they mostly just want to stay away from you.
Right.
These wild animals just want to stay unless you find one that's sick or whatever. But yeah, I guess the only animal encounter that kind of scared me a little bit. So in Vancouver Island, I had a couple of weird episodes where it was at night and maybe I woke up to go, pee or something. I don't know, but it was pitch dark, and I heard a cat meow, straight
Ooh.
up legit, like a house cat meow. And I thought, this is stupid, naive me, because I've heard I've heard mountain lions scream before, but I've never heard one meow before. Well, I thought, I am way out in the woods. How did somebody let some poor little house cat go out here? And I was beat, I'm like, well, doodle, he is what it is. I'm going to sleep. I don't have any cat food, so I can't help you. So then the producers show up a couple days later or whatever and change out the batteries. And they always ask you, is there anything notable on your footage? Or, do you have any wild animal encounters? And I said, well, I heard a stupid house cat meow by me. And one of the survivals guys goes, oh, mate, that's a mountain lion. And I thought they were trying to scare me. I'm like, that's not a mountain lion. So then I moved to a different location. And one night I heard a meow again. And I thought, gosh, that house cat's, kind of making some rounds, because this ways away from my first location. So I didn't really think much about it. And then I got home, and Jose was telling me that he actually had at least one or two scream in the middle of the night. And when they scream, it's quite the experience. But I was like, yeah, I heard a couple cats meow, but that was it. He's like, Larry, you had a mountain lion right outside your shelter.
Oh
I'm like, no,
man.
man, I've never heard a meow. Showed me a YouTube video, and sure enough, they meow just like a house cat, man.
Really? Even with this, obviously a mountain lion is so much bigger than the house cat. Is the meow is the same pitch and it sounds just like a house cat?
Yeah, it was insane. Look it up. Look it up on YouTube. Look up just like mountain lion meow or something like that,
Yeah.
and you'll see it's like that.
Wow. No, that's terrifying. And that's the thing, man. Like, I think one of those would be enough for me. I mean, just like just the constant thought of what could be sitting outside my little shelter would be enough to send me home. So this might be a stupid question, but every time I watch it and they show where you guys are located and in your locations, it'll be like 3.8 miles away, so and so. And I'm like, theoretically, if you guys were walking in a similar direction, you could like meet up with another contestant. And if that were to happen, did they even address if that were to happen, or if that's even possible, or what happens then?
For sure. In Vancouver Island, they went over it quite a bit, because not only could we have potentially ran into other people, although I will say when they say 3.8 miles away, I think they're full of crap. But anyway, I think we're further away than that. And I don't know where they pull those numbers out. Maybe they're right. I don't know. But anyway, in Vancouver Island, they especially made it, they told us what to do in case a local came up, because it was a very not very well kept secret in Vancouver Island that we were filming the show, because they had done it the year before, and the locals all knew, because the producers had asked permission from the native tribes to use some of their land and stuff like that. So the little local community knew we were out there, and they begged them not to come up to us, and they never did to me, that's for sure. But I would see boats out on the water and stuff, and I would kind of try to hide, because I didn't want anybody to come up to me or whatever. But basically, immediately you were supposed to call production. But in Mongolia, and also in Vancouver Island, it was much harder to come into contact with a fellow contestant, because the terrain was so difficult to traverse. And you might find a nice fishing spot where I was, but you could walk maybe 10 miles before you found something other than just a cliff. Mm-hmm. So, and it was really, really mountainous and thick, like I said, so it wasn't as big a deal. But you're always supposed to carry this GPS, and so they can watch you. They always have somebody watching all of us on a computer screen, and they see if a couple of you get too close together, they'll say, hey, you need to turn around, or somebody else needs to turn around, or whatever. In Mongolia, when I launched, it was much more open. And so one of the producers looked at a finger of the landscape or whatever, and he said, okay, you can go from that ridge line to that ridge line. That's your area, and as far back as you want to go. So, far back was just nothing but mountains and stuff. But so one day I kind of take a big hike. It's funny because I needed to wash my pants, so I wanted to find some sand. I just wanted a nice sandy beach. Plus I was just looking for more fishing area. Mm-hmm. So I went and I found this nice sandy bar, and I was scooping up some sand, and I got a beep on my yellow brick. My GPS said, "You're out of your area, go back." So then I went back and I texted them and I said, "Am I okay now?" And they said yes. So, they keep
Wow.
pretty close track on you. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. And there's probably a ton of stuff that goes into this show that the viewers just don't even know. And that's what's going to drive me crazy, is because I know as soon as we're done with this podcast, there's going to be like 10 questions I wanted to ask you that I know I'm going to forget about. But so if you had to give us a percentage of the experience of what we see, like what we experience as the viewer, what percentage of that do we get to actually experience compared to what you experience?
Well, that depends on the participant, because it depends on how much they filmed.
Mhm.
But like a 0.5%, maybe. I mean, nothing, man. Hardly. I mean, you think about it. I was out there in Vancouver Island for 60, whatever it was, 64 days or whatever, and you saw 10 episodes, hour-long episode. Maybe you saw 10 or 20 minutes of me, like at the
Right.
most, out of 10 episodes. So that's what, 40 minutes? You saw 40 minutes out of 64 days? You
Yeah,
saw a
that's true.
sliver, man.
That's
A
true,
sliver.
because when I went
Yeah.
and watched when I was going through season 5, I actually didn't watch the whole season through. I would pretty much just skip to your parts, and because this is when we had planned to have you on the podcast and everything. So I was like, I need to watch this. I didn't even know he was in this season. So I would kind of just skip to your parts. And before I knew it, I was on episode like 9 or 10. And I was like, if you really break it down, there's only so much footage of these people. And so the people who like are introduced in the 4th episode, and I'm like, is this because they just didn't have enough film, or how do they choose?
Well, yeah, and it's been a little bit different. The longer that the seasons go on, they show different things. In other words, in season 1 and season 2, according to them, this is what they've told us, okay? Because we have sometimes contacted them, different people have contacted them and said, "What the hell, man? How come this person was on way more than me," or whatever, you know? And basically what they say is, they say, "Well, we're not going to show everybody's shelter build, because once you've seen a couple of shelters, you've seen them. We're not going to show everybody, surprised that they're alone for the first time or whatever." And then sometimes they're kind of brutal and they say, "Look, your filming sucked. We didn't have much to choose from, so this is what you get."
Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured the people who, because they got a lot of people to introduce, and by like episode 2 or 3, you're just starting to meet new people, and sometimes I that's what I figured. I figured, okay, this person must have had some bad footage, because they're showing way less of this person than that person. Um, so when you left, obviously, I watched like the little reunion where you guys all got together and you got that massive back tattoo. How did that? I'm sure you get questions all the time about the back tat. Was that your first tattoo, and you just kept going, or did you already have some?
No, I already had some tattoos. I've had I can't remember how many I had before that, 3 maybe. And then I have been wanting a new tattoo before Vancouver Island. I had been wanting a new tattoo for years, but just wanted it to mean something and didn't know really what I wanted to get, and it wasn't a super high priority. But then one day I was sitting in my shelter and I thought, man, what better way to tell a story, or what better tattoo than this, And so I just started thinking about what I wanted to do, and I don't know why, it just kind of came to me for season 2. I just said, let's put my area, in the center, and then put all these things that meant so much to me around the outside. And that was just the idea for that one. And then when I went to Mongolia, I'm like, okay, I can finish my whole back probably with this with this
Yeah,
experience, and I
yeah.
just thought about, hey, what do I want with this? And I just wanted a little more detail thing, but it's more of a, it's a permanent reminder. It's kind of like what I was saying before about season 5, when I went back and I knew I wasn't going to be able to handle it or push myself as far as I was able to push myself the first time, but I still wanted to remember this experience and imprint it on my mind. And, as kind of weird or crazy as this sounds, pain helps you remember.
Hmm.
Pain helps you, you know, totally remember stuff. So the back tattoo was kind of, especially Mongolia, it was pretty painful when he was going. I'm not a big guy, so I don't have a lot of fat or skin.
Yeah.
So when he was going over my spine or my ribs or whatever, I was just like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. Just like totally thinking about it. And in Mongolia one time it rained, and I fucked up and didn't bring the right clothes because I didn't think it was going to rain. I thought it was going to snow. So I didn't go outside my shelter for 3 days. And I remember just sitting there, like, except for to go pee or something. But I remember just laying in there, just thinking, I'm going to remember this. This is 3 days without eating, without moving hardly, and just sitting with my thoughts. And I'm going to remember this. And I'm going to remember I don't need to do this again, or I'm going to remember that this is a beautiful experience, but it's hard, or whatever. Just everything that went into it.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to ask you actually. If they came to you and they said, Larry, we know you've been on 2 times already, but this next one is for $2 million. We're gonna put you in Patagonia or wherever, would you do it for a third time, or if you had enough, you've gotten enough out of the experience and you're ready to be done?
Well, when I came back from season 5 from Mongolia, I told my son, I said, don't ever, ever freaking let me do this ever again. But as time passes, you kind of just, forget about things like that and stuff. And, I kind of joke that the way society is nowadays, or the way the world is right now, it wouldn't be a bad idea just to go chill outside somewhere and be alone and get paid to camp. But I don't know, man, I wouldn't be able to last very long. I figure I can last usually no problem 30 days. But after that, it's really tough to revisit. For me, it's really tough to revisit that hunger. So I would do what they call scripted reality, where maybe, you're out by yourself and the producer says, okay, here's the problem. We want you to solve it. And at the end of the day, I could come home and have a sandwich. But to do a starving show like that again, I'm not going to do that again, I don't think.
Yeah. No, I
Really, the
mean,
money doesn't, ironically, the only person in season 2 who went out after the money was the winner, Dave. Everybody else wanted it just to be an experience. Like for me, this was like, I mean, obviously the money would have been great. And, this kind of just goes to my arrogance or ego. I really wanted to win bad. But basically what it boiled down to for me was like a Super Bowl, or like when you go to these survival classes or you go out back and you practice, it's like, I equate it to like when my son played football. If he only got to practice, or like you playing basketball,
right.
if you only got to practice every day but never got to play a game, you would, it kind of gets a little bit boring after a while. I mean, sure, you love the game and you love to do it, but you're not going to push yourself as hard because you don't know it's for real. So then you're in a game and you're like, hell yeah, this is for real. I'm going to do the best I can,
Yeah.
you know?
And I can actually weirdly relate to that right now, actually, because out here in Spain, we're having another lockdown. They're talking about potentially because of this virus. And all I've been doing for the last 2 months is we've had scrimmage after scrimmage. We're just practicing and practicing. And I'm like, man, I'm ready for the game. I'm ready to get in the real game.
Yeah.
So it's
You want that adrenaline rush. You want that real thing, man.
yeah, of course. And it gets tedious, those practices where you're like, man, you're supposed to be preparing for your game Saturday. And it's like, are we even going to have a game Saturday? So it's
Right.
it's a whole nother mental game in itself. But so you're talking about being locked in your shelter for 3 days because of the rain in Mongolia. So what do you do when the camera's not rolling? I mean, of course you're doing stuff to make your shelter better, this and that, but do you ever just like, are you ever like, I think I would, for some reason, I always think I would sing a lot. I'm like, I don't know. I think I would just sit there and sing songs, or I have no idea. Like, what did you do when the cameras were not on you?
Well, I basically had the camera on me the whole time, unless I was like sleepy, going to the bathroom or something like that. But I don't know, man. You just kind of go into a zone, and I mean, you can stare at a leaf for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and just look at the intricacies of it, or you can look. And a lot of the things, what my mind was always just spinning. So I was always thinking, okay, what can I do? What can I do to improve my situation? How could I fish better? Should I do this? Should I do that? So I'm always just thinking. But then there's a lot of times where you're just like, this place is really pretty. I wonder what my family's doing back home. Hmm. I mean, you're just lost in your thoughts. You're not doing anything.
Right.
You're just staring off space, just zoning.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, I
I didn't
can,
do anything. I didn't sing. I didn't make baskets. I just sat there and tried to conserve energy.
Yeah, which seems like a smart thing to do. I mean, I know that I think it was season 2 where the guy he was a veteran and he was like climbing mountains and working out all day, and I'm like, I'm not a
Mhm.
survivalist, but from what I understand, that doesn't seem like it's the best idea to be using calories up like that. But I don't know. That's just my take from it.
Well, it depends on everybody's mindset too. And after a while, you get there, and I know who you're talking about. And he's a good friend of mine. And there's kind of a wake up call after about 3 weeks, maybe 30 days, but for sure after about 3 weeks, where you're like, this is going to be tough. There's
Mhm.
no magical thing that I'm doing that's bringing in the food. Keep in mind, Vancouver Island, you weren't allowed to take really big game unless you had a bow. And then if a buck deer happened to come by, then you were allowed to take it. You can't take a doe. You can't trap a doe. You can't trap bear. You can't trap. They were even a little bit saying you weren't supposed to trap squirrels. It was basically all fish. So once you get out there and you realize, okay, I'm bringing in some fish, but I'm kind of starving, and this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. Then sometimes people put a date in their head, or they're like, I'm just going to go as far as I can, or whatever. Kind of like what I did in Mongolia. For me in Mongolia, I said, I'm going to do 30 days because there's no shame in 30 days. I did 41 just because, things
Mhm.
worked out and I was able to catch food and stuff like that. But people put it in their mind. They're like, okay, I'm going to last this long. And Justin, that's who you're talking about, is Justin
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Big
yeah.
Toe. And yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if he was 100% thinking that. And he's a huge veteran and he's huge into helping folks prevent veteran suicide.
Hmm.
So I know he wanted, and I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's like 21 veteran members a day or something commit suicide, or a week, something like that. And so he definitely wanted to go past 21. And that's why I think he took a big hike when he could on 21. But he's also kind of a workout guy. He likes to work out. But yeah, that's definitely not something that I do or would subscribe to. But I mean, he made it 30 some odd days, and there's not a lot of guys that could do that. And one thing he told me too is, he said, look, man, he said, I knew things were going downhill. He's like, I could have been Skeletor out here crawling on the beach, but I didn't want people to see me like that. And he's
Right.
got, he didn't want to see his veterans and stuff, see them all broken down. And, he people can, you can push yourself further, but you got to look at the pros and cons.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the thing. He seemed like he was in pretty good spirits and he was doing some workouts. And like I said, I was like, man, I don't know if that's like what he should be doing, but he seemed to be doing well. From at least he portrayed that he was doing well. So I was like, you know what, maybe he's that it works for him, and different things work for everybody. And it's there's no real script to how to manage yourself out there. But
Well, after you get out there, like I said, your priorities change, I think, is kind of what I was trying to say, is your priorities change. When you go out there, you're like, well, and some people never went out there to win. Some people just went out there for the experience. And I'm not, I'm not saying that about Justin or anything, but some people just went out there, for the experience alone. And once it started to get bad and they knew it was going to get bad, they're like, what's the freaking point? I don't need to do this. The money was never an option, or not really a factor for a lot of us when we went out, and they just, whatever.
yeah. So you were saying a lot of the people weren't really even there for the money, and that's kind of to be
No.
expected when you guys are all survivalists. It's a passion of yours. If they were to, when you were in either of your locations, if they were to have raised that prize money to like 3 million or something crazy like $5 million, something just nuts, how how would that have affected your journey? Like how far would you have pushed yourself? I mean, to near death for that money, or like how, at what point would it become, okay, now it's for the money. Now I'm doing this, and so what are your thoughts on that?
I pushed myself as hard as I could. I did. Doesn't matter how much money you dangled in front of me. There's no amount of money. Maybe in Mongolia I could have lasted a few more days if I really wanted to. I probably could have lasted a few more days for sure. Vancouver Island, I was broke, man. I couldn't. I just wanted out. There was nothing I could do. It didn't matter how much money you put in front of me. $500,000 is nothing to sneeze at, you know.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't. You could put $1 trillion in front of me, and I was broke. I never
Yeah.
been broke in my life, and I couldn't come back from it, man. I was like, get me out of here and get me something to eat, because I'm
Yeah.
dying.
You had mentioned in season 5 that after Vancouver Island that going back to the real world was difficult. You know, you mentioned that mentally it was tough to go to work. It was tough to do everyday things again. And did you have that same issue after season 5, or was your whole mentality a lot more understanding?
My mentality after season 5 was a lot better. It was a lot better to reintegrate into society. I still felt bad, but I also, like I said, it was more therapeutic to where I looked back on what I did on season 2, and then looked back on what I did on season 5, and I was, more happy with myself, you might say. So yeah, it wasn't as bad. It still sucked going back to work. I mean, I appreciative of my job and my employer and stuff like that, but I don't necessarily enjoy my job. So that was tough to face the realization that, hey man, you got another 10 or 15 years of this, you're going to have to go back to work. Vancouver Island was really, really hard to come back to society. Really hard. It put a lot of stress on my marriage. It was, I basically told my wife, I just don't even care about anything anymore. I just want to go live under a bridge. I don't care about technology. I'll just go camp. I'll just live off of whatever. And then, time passes and you kind of realize that you can't do that and stuff like that. But yeah, I was pretty broke down after season 2.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, so you must have had coworkers and people who watched your show or watched you on season 2, and you're like, man, I hate my job. And did they ever say anything to you at work? Like, come on, Larry, like, you don't like us anymore? Or was it any of that? Or was it just like, nah, we get it.
The hardest thing is to have a conversation with your boss after you said that on national TV, to be quite honest with you, because he about halfway through, he looked at me and he said, dude, could you say any more crappy things about your work? Are you kidding me? And I'm like, dude, it's not you. So the whole thing is that my damn job just takes such a toll on my body that every day I come home, I hurt, it sucks. And so I told him that, and he laughed, and he likes to bring up every once in a while. So I'm an electrician and I'm in a union. So all of us have, I would imagine it's maybe like you guys, but the players are in unions, and then the management are in unions, or a union, So the management guys were all getting together during a contract time, and some guy came up to my boss and was like, hey man, you ever seen this show Alone? What about that guy? He's an electrician and he's just bitching about his employer, bitching. I mean, he just went on. And my boss was like, yeah, he's my employee. So, but I'm super lucky that my employer is a really good guy. He's a big fan of the show, and he's just a really nice guy. But yeah, I did get some freaking grief from him. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the old, it's not you, it's me kind of thing. But
Right.
that,
I mean, what else are you going to say to your boss?
yeah, I mean, but it wasn't like, too direct. Like I don't think
Right.
you mentioned you were an electrician in season 2. I don't know, maybe you did, but I didn't catch that.
No, I tried to keep it pretty vague.
Yeah, because I remember my mom and I were like, man, what does Larry do? Because he really doesn't want to go back to his job. It was fun, and we have to thank you because during quarantine, during this crazy year, me, my sister, my girlfriend, my mother, we'd sit down every night. We'd watch an episode of Alone, and you brought us a lot of entertainment, a lot of laughs, and it was awesome to watch. So thank you for coming on the Ben's Friends podcast. It was awesome. I was super excited to have you on. I'd love to have you on again if that's possible. And good luck with whatever you got going on in your life next, and hope all the best for you, man.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, man. I had a really good time. Take care.
All right, Larry.
Ben's Friends